commenter wanted me to elaborate more on the dim picture that my previous video painted regarding the proliferation of content caused by AI, and perhaps even the danger itself beyond just the sheer volume of information that swamps out any ability to discern a fact. This is a massively multivariable problem. The same technological innovation occurring at a different point in history creates a different reality. In this case, I think that this saturation of consciousness will affect different communities differently. I think the result will be perhaps a magnification of what we've already seen with the internet, meaning that what we have thus far is kind of the skinny end of the wedge, and AI represents a fattening of that wedge. I think the internet has caused some people to become more conscious and others to become less conscious. People who carry a great deal of pain and trauma may have occasion, with the availability of the internet, to find information that would help them heal and ultimately ascend in consciousness. Though I think the abundance of unhealed people in our society would suggest that this is not the majority of cases. But the availability of the information creates a possibility where there was none before. Or maybe there was just less before. One would have to encounter the right source face-to-face or through a library. And of course, such teachings have been around for thousands of years. But now with the internet, anyone, anywhere, just about can encounter them if they go looking earnestly. On the other side are people who are made more unconscious by the internet, more weighed down with ideas over which they can obsess. The people who do the most unconscious things, assuming that they're not schizophrenic, have typically obsessed over the thing they're about to do before they do it. They didn't go into it without thinking about it. When they leave a manifesto, then this is a manifestation of their obsessive thinking. So the people who do these things are just enveloped in layer upon layer of obsessive thoughts. The topics can be myriad. It can be some variation of how the world was unfair to them. It could be some kind of ideology that revolves around an identity. It could be an activism of some kind to fix the world. It could be a struggle between nations. I think people pick up these obsessions in much the same way that they pick up religious beliefs. It's just happenstance. They run into a piece of information that relates to them in a certain way and gets their attention, and they just go down the rabbit hole. And so the more rabbit holes there are to fall into around you because of technology, the more likely it is to happen. There always seem to be some outliers among the ideologically possessed who are willing to go to the extreme in the name of their cause. And so when you have more of these rabbit holes, you get more of these activists. And when you have more of these activists, there are more people over in that outlier category who are willing to do harmful things to others in the name of a cause. The effects of saturation and strong identification with a self relating to that content has a number of different effects. One that I allude to often is the opportunity cost of rumination. There's a lack of spaciousness in that condition that eventually cries out for relief through potentially any number of things, because it's not apparent to the sufferer what it is they lack. So what's believed to be lacking could be any number of things, like a change of venue, or a change of state through substances, or a change of state through eating, or a change of state through sex, or a change of state through shopping. Anything to bring alignment for a time. There's no patience in that state of obsessive thinking, because so much is staked on the future that the future is looked to, and we just have to hurry up and get to the future. We got to get through right now. We got to hurry and get to this thing we're thinking of all the time. An ideologically possessed person has more conditions to place on a friendship. Their allegiance is contingent upon more things aligning than somebody who's in surrender to the reality of what is. These conditions greatly reduce the number of people with whom an activist can associate comfortably. And generally speaking, the burden to pursue acquisitions and experience that is placed on one in deep unconsciousness is not conducive to procreation. And it is more conducive to an early checkout. The people who do that don't lack for rumination, though there are occasionally spiritual figures who do this for one reason or another. So with respect to the overall effect on the population, it will not be even. Some people yield their attention over to screens more readily than others. It seems that the future is with people who come from a more traditional background, one that shuns popular culture and the avenues through which it's delivered. Their fertility won't be impacted by the accumulation of content between the ears. So the people who we would call normies or systemites, and in saying that I make no claim to be anything different, their bloodlines get destroyed by the system. They just converge asymptotically to zero. Assuming the ratio of systemites to traditional people, of which there are many types, like Amish or other Abrahamic religions, if the ratio between those groups skews to where the traditionalists greatly outnumber the systemites, whose numbers have attrited due to the spiritual inversion and decadence and degeneracy that information overload brings, then that population of systemites could become the tail and no longer the dog, and then simply be forced into some kind of conversion. However, if somehow the conversion rate of traditional people into systemites through the process of seduction and subversion that happens to second and third generations of traditional people who live in a non-traditional society, if that conversion can happen frequently enough, then there could be a balance in Western civilization of systemites and traditionalists, in which case those traditionalists would become like a fountainhead of people, and as long as their defection rate was sufficient and the fertility rates of those recent defectors was sufficient, then perhaps a balance could be struck. That's kind of what it feels like in the West currently. Like there's kind of a balance, but in places that balance is being tilted through both immigration and the attrition of the systemites. Like there are churches that are very serious about their doctrine, and if you observe the family sizes, they are the future. So among people who have children, you have traditionalists who have high fertility, or fundamentalists, I guess is another word you could use. And then you have systemites who maybe are bimodal in that some have non-replacement levels of fertility due to a hesitancy or an abundance of caution. And then there are others who are completely irresponsible who have very high fertility. So if the popular culture and the content that is imbibed therein becomes too destructive in its effect, it becomes obvious to traditionalists that defection is a mistake. And so in the scheme of peoples that I've described, the various types of traditionalists and the two types of systemites, you would have a change in the composition of systemites to skew more and more like the proles in the book 1984. But I think ultimately we may be looking at a traditionalist takeover, and then probably holy wars between different types of traditionalists. I don't see pure systemites stepping up to put their lives on the line to defend their civilizations against invasive traditionalists or resurgent traditionalists. I'm not an expert on the lore of science fiction, but like the Warhammer 40,000 and the Dune series, I think they both have some backstories that involve this type of a scenario where technology creates a collapse, and then from the ashes of that you have some kind of strict traditionalist regime that emerges that has like a Luddite flavoring to it. People tend to think technological progress is completely unstoppable, but the planet is cobbled with little places where people can't do certain things, and it would be just as easy to restrict them from technology if there was like a top-down hierarchical religious structure with sort of a Stalinist apparatus to keep it going, you know, something like a theocracy or the most extreme dictatorial regimes you can imagine. And while history does have repeating patterns, the arc of technology is a novel path. And we've not seen the long-term impacts on humanity of a whole host of technologies. And when I say long-term impacts, I don't mean like physical health impacts. I mean the impact on our psyche. A person can be conditioned into a state of helplessness, into a state of non-functionality, not just through content, but through convenience that technology affords. the people who immerse their lives in all of this obsession-generating content and body-rotting convenience, their selfishness will atomize them, and their legacy will disappear like scattered coals that used to be a fire. So the future belongs to those who can maintain their fertility in the face of degenerative technologies, and ultimately those who have something to live and die for. History shows that nationalism can do that, as can religion. But I don't think decadence will generate or motivate the defense of what allows and facilitates it. It just gets overthrown by harder men. So yeah, I think the AI revolution will impact all humanity, but it will be corrosive, more so to certain parts, and the attrition of those parts will cause an imbalance that will lead to a struggle of the orders. And I think ultimately the future belongs to people who are a lot more serious than the ones who are in control right now.